In 1955, a Hollywood agent walked into the offices of the most feared scandal magazine in America and offered them a deal. Kill the story about Rock Hudson, and I'll give you something better. What he gave them was the criminal record of a cowboy actor named Rory Calhoun, a man who had robbed jewelry stores at 15, stolen cars across state lines at 17, served hard time in a federal reformatory and San Quintín. He was now starring in films alongside Marilyn Monroe. The magazine published everything: the mugshots, the aliases, the prison boxing record, 5 full pages of a past that should have ended any career in 1950s Hollywood. And Rory Calhoun's response? Quote, "They asked if I wanted to talk about it. I said, hell yes." End quote. His career didn't just survive the scandal, it got bigger. But this is the story of a boy who was beaten by his stepfather, locked in solitary confinement for a year, walked out of prison on his 21st birthday, and somehow, against every odd that existed, became one of the biggest Western stars of the 1950s. A man who was sacrificed by his own agent to protect another man's secret. A man whose name is now known to millions of people who have never seen a single frame of his work, thanks to a joke on The Simpsons. This story starts in a place you'd never expect. The boy called Smokey, who was robbing jewelry stores at 15. His name wasn't Rory Calhoun. It wasn't even close. He was born Francis Timothy McCown on August 8, 1922 in Los Angeles, California. His father, Floyd Conley McCown, a professional gambler, either died or disappeared when the boy was just 9 months old. He never knew him. His mother, Elizabeth, remarried a man named Nathaniel Durgan. The family moved to Santa Cruz, California, and young Francis, who now went by Frank Durgan, or sometimes Timothy Durgan, depending on which name he was using that week, grew up in poverty with a stepfather who beat him regularly. By 13, he was already in front of a juvenile court judge, not once, but 3 separate times. For burglary and possession of firearms, he'd stolen a revolver. At 14, he was stealing cars. At 15, he'd graduated to robbing jewelry stores because diamonds could be fenced for quick cash. His prison nickname was Smokey. He cycled through aliases the way other teenagers cycled through girlfriends: Francis McCown, Timothy Durgan, Francis Norton, Jack Rain. At 17, he dropped out of school and left home specifically to escape his stepfather's fists. But by then, the damage was done. He'd already crossed a line that would follow him for the rest of his life. He'd driven a stolen car across state lines, and that turned a juvenile delinquent into a federal prisoner. 3 years in El Reno, a year in solitary, and the priest who changed everything. The federal offense, transporting a stolen vehicle across state lines. 17-year-old Francis McCown was in the El Reno Federal Reformatory in Oklahoma. It was one of the toughest juvenile facilities in the country, and he was sentenced to 3 years. He was not a model prisoner. He slugged the gangster and sent him to the hospital, earning 8 days in solitary confinement, followed by 42 days in lockup on half rations with no cigarettes. At some point during his sentence, he spent a full year in solitary for allegedly inciting a riot, but he also channeled his aggression into boxing. Inside El Reno, he fought 12 bouts against professional fighters who were serving time and won 10 of them. Then came the moment that changed the trajectory of his entire life. A prison chaplain named Father John J. Canale, a former college boxer, intervened during an incident where Calhoun had gotten a gun away from a guard and was threatening to use it. Father Canale didn't call for backup. He offered to box a few rounds in exchange for the weapon. Calhoun agreed, and he never laid a glove on the priest. Father Canale became his mentor. He taught him to pray. He taught him self-respect. And years later, when the world knew Francis McCown as Rory Calhoun, the priest said, quote, "His transformation to a respected place in the world is a great personal satisfaction to me." After completing his federal sentence, Calhoun was transferred to San Quintín State Prison on pending California state charges. He was facing a possible 20-year sentence, but Father Canale advocated for him. And on August 8, 1943, his 21st birthday, he walked out of prison, a free man. He never went back. 3. Lumberjack, miner, cowpuncher, and a chance meeting in the Hollywood Hills. Most ex-cons come home to nothing. The Rory Calhoun came home to a string of jobs that read like a casting director's fantasy resume. A lumberjack in California's redwood forests, hard rock miner near Reno, cowpuncher, forest ranger, truck driver, iron worker, Oklahoma oil field worker, even professional boxer. Every one of those jobs taught him something he'd later use on screen: how to ride a horse, throw a punch, handle a firearm, and survive outdoors. He learned not on a studio backlot, but in prison yards and logging camps. Then, in 1943, came the encounter that changed everything. While horseback riding in the Hollywood Hills, he ran into actor Alan Ladd. As Calhoun told it, quote, "I met this fellow up in the hills and stopped to talk. He asked me if I was an actor, and I said, hell no, we talked some more. And he asked, how would you like to be in films?" End quote. Historians doubt the truthfulness of that meeting. The more reliable version is that while looking for extra work at Paramount, Calhoun met Sue Carol Ladd, Alan Ladd's wife, and a prominent talent agent who coached him and arranged a screen test at 20th Century Fox. His first credited film role came in 1945, The Bullfighter, a Laurel and Hardy comedy. He had one line. He was billed as Frank McCown. At a party hosted by the Ladds, he caught the eye of Henry Wilson, the most powerful and predatory talent agent in Hollywood. Wilson managed a stable of young, handsome actors whom he renamed and groomed for stardom. Rock Hudson, Tab Hunter, Guy Madison, and now Francis Timothy McCown. Wilson initially rechristened him Troy Donahue, a name he later recycled for a completely different actor who became famous with it. Then David O. Selznick himself weighed in, quote, "Rory, Jan, because you're a Leo, Leos are lions and lions roar," end quote. For the surname, Selznick offered three options: Donahue, Calhoun, or Callahan. He picked Calhoun, and a prison inmate named Smokey became a Hollywood leading man named Rory. 4. From San Quintín to CinemaScope, with Marilyn Monroe. Calhoun's career at 20th Century Fox took off fast. 6'3", with heavy shoulders, blue eyes, and black hair. He projected an authentic physical toughness that most Hollywood cowboys couldn't match. Because his toughness wasn't a performance, it was a biography. His two most famous films both featured Marilyn Monroe, and both were shot in the groundbreaking new widescreen format that was supposed to save Hollywood from television. In How to Marry a Millionaire, released in 1953, Rory Calhoun played Ebenezer Salem, a humble forest ranger in Maine, whom Betty Grable's character mistakes for a wealthy landowner. The film was the first ever shot in CinemaScope. It became the fourth highest grossing film of 1953, earning approximately $8 million worldwide. Calhoun shared the screen with Monroe, Grable, and Lauren Bacall, three of the biggest female stars on earth. River of No Return, released in 1954 and directed by Otto Preminger, Calhoun played Harry Weston, a crooked gambler and the film's villain, opposite Robert Mitchum and Monroe. Shot in the Canadian Rockies, the film is notably one of the first to use a blood squib to simulate a realistic bullet impact, specifically when Calhoun's character is shot dead. 10 years earlier, that man was fencing stolen diamonds in Santa Cruz, and now he was sharing a CinemaScope frame with the most famous woman in the world. Calhoun was characteristically blunt about how he ended up there. Quote, "I liked the money it brought in. I felt it would be nice to go back to forestry with a neat bankroll when these fellows found me out. I never had any feeling I'd make good." And on how prison prepared him for Hollywood, quote, "As a juvenile delinquent, everything was a sham. Everything was pretense. That's where I learned to act. In front of creditors and the judge, I never got paid for it." 5. The Western star who could actually ride, shoot, and throw a punch. Unlike most Hollywood cowboys who needed stunt doubles for anything more demanding than sitting on a horse, Rory Calhoun did his own riding, his own fighting, and his own stunts. The skills were real, forged in logging camps and prison boxing rings, not acting classes. His Western filmography through the 1950s was enormous. Dawn at Socorro in 1954 is widely considered one of his finest performances, playing a tuberculosis-stricken gunfighter who knows he's dying but refuses to back down. The Spoilers in 1955 with Jeff Chandler featured what was at the time the longest screen fight in film history. He worked with Susan Hayward, Shelley Winters, Piper Laurie, and Edward G. Robinson across dozens of pictures. Of Hayward, he said, quote, "I learned a lot from that lady. I learned more about my trade, about presence in front of the camera by watching her." In 1958, CBS gave him his own television series, The Texan. It ran for 78 episodes across 2 seasons. He played Bill Longley, a decorated ex-Confederate captain roaming Texas as a fast-drawing drifter. The show reached number 15 in the 1958 to 59 Nielsen season with an average viewership of 12.4 million. Guest stars included a young James Coburn and Harry Dean Stanton. Bit writers included Louis L'Amour himself. Calhoun could have filmed a 3rd season. He chose to walk away and return to features. In 1960, he received 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, one for film and one for television. Not bad for a kid from San Quintín. 6. The deal that sacrificed his secrets to protect Rock Hudson. In 1955, while Calhoun's career was at its peak, Confidential magazine, the most feared scandal publication in America, placed a $10,000 bounty on Rock Hudson. They wanted confirmation of what Hollywood insiders already knew, that the biggest male box office star in the country was gay. In 1950s America, that story would have been career-ending. Henry Wilson, who managed both Hudson and Calhoun, learned about the impending expose, and he made a decision that would echo through Hollywood history for decades. He went to Confidential and offered them a trade. Kill the Rock Hudson story, and I'll give you Rory Calhoun's criminal record. Every conviction, every alias, every mugshot, Preston Reform School, El Reno, San Quintín, all of it. As a bonus, now, Wilson also handed over information about Tab Hunter's arrest at a gay gathering in Glendale, a client who had recently fired him. Confidential took the deal. The May 1955 issue ran a 5-page cover story with the headline, Movie Star Rory Calhoun, but for the grace of God, still a convict. It featured a glamour photo alongside a 1940 mugshot from his teenage arrest for second-degree burglary. Calhoun was not consulted about the deal. His own agent sacrificed his deepest secret to protect the bigger client. The scandal should have ended him. A convicted felon exposed in the pages of America's most read gossip magazine in the middle of the Eisenhower era. Career over. Except Rory Calhoun didn't flinch. Quote, they asked if I wanted to talk about it. I said, hell yes. It turned out to be an upbeat story. Not an expose so much as a success story, end quote. And on whether Hollywood punished him, quote, hell no, that's when the exploitation started. Get him a picture, and let's cash in on this, end quote. Like Robert Mitchum's marijuana arrest 6 years earlier, the disclosure solidified Calhoun's bad boy image rather than destroying it. The studio offered him the treasure of Pancho Villa immediately after the story broke. The deal's consequences fell hardest on Wilson himself. His established clients left. New talent refused to sign. He spiraled into alcoholism and bankruptcy and died in 1978 at 67 in a home for indigent entertainment workers. Rock Hudson's secret held for another 30 years until his 1985 AIDS diagnosis. Rory Calhoun, the man who was sacrificed, outlived them both. 7. Lita Barron, 79 women, and the summer count. Blue Calhoun married actress and dancer Lita Barron, born Isabel Castro in Andalusia, Spain. On August 29, 1948, they met at Tiros, the legendary Sunset Strip nightclub. Before proposing, he confessed his entire criminal past. Her response became part of Hollywood legend. Quote, you were a bad boy, weren't you? When do we get married? End quote. They had 3 daughters, Cindy, Tammy, and Lori. But the marriage was volatile. When Lita Barron filed for divorce in June 1969, she named Betty Grable and 78 other women as, his adulterous partners. Calhoun's response, heck, she didn't even include half of them. When the judge questioned the number, Calhoun reportedly said, quote, that was just the summer count. They didn't give me the whole year. While still married to Barron, he had fathered a daughter named Athena with actress Bettina Marcus. Athena later became a Las Vegas showgirl. As she said of her father, quote, if my father were not an actor, he would have been a cowboy because he loved the outdoors so much. He did not like enclosed areas, end quote. He did not like enclosed areas. From a man who spent years in prison cells, that might be the most revealing quote in this entire story. He married Australian journalist Sue Rhodes in 1971. They divorced in 1979, then remarried in 1982 and stayed together until his death. In total, he had 5 daughters across 3 relationships, 8 giant killer rabbits, human sausages, and the cult classic that refuses to die. As westerns declined in the 1960s, Calhoun reinvented himself, starting with a dator nobody saw coming. In 1961, he starred in The Colossus of Rhodes, the featured directorial debut of Sergio Leone, years before Leone invented the spaghetti western. It was filmed in Spain and Italy. Calhoun reportedly looked uncomfortable in a toga. When he was robbed during filming and producers tried to extend shooting beyond his contract, he flew to London and waited at the Savoy Hotel until they delivered a suitcase full of money. He was considered for the lead of James West in The Wild Wild West, but lost the role to Robert Conrad. He reportedly turned down a part on Dallas, a decision he deeply regretted. When Larry Hagman became a cultural phenomenon as J.R. Ewing, his two most enduring later performances are both cult classics. Night of the Lepus in 1972 was a dead serious horror film about giant killer rabbits. Yes, giant killer rabbits. It became legendary camp. Then came Motel Hell in 1980. Calhoun played Farmer Vincent Smith, a folksy, charming farmer who murders travelers and grinds them into sausages. The tagline? Quote, "It takes all kinds of critters to make Farmer Vincent's fritters." End quote. Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars and described Calhoun as looking like a Norman Rockwell model in his bib overalls. The film earned $6.3 million and became a genuine cult classic. Critics credited Calhoun's performance, described as a perfect balance between sanity and derangement, as the reason it endures. He's a former San Quintín inmate playing a cheerful murderer who makes sausages out of people. Hollywood couldn't have written a better second act if it tried. 9. The Simpsons, Standing and Walking, and the strangest immortality in television history. In 1995, something happened that guaranteed Rory Calhoun's name would outlive every one of his films. Season 6 of The Simpsons, Episode 20, titled 2 Dozens and 1 Greyhounds. Mr. Burns steals 25 greyhound puppies. When one puppy stands on its hind legs, Burns is enchanted. He names it Little Monty and says the puppy reminds him of someone, the person who is always standing and walking. Smithers supplies the answer, Rory Calhoun. The joke resolves the entire episode. When Bart mixes up the puppies so Burns can't identify Little Monty, Burns considers killing them all, but relents because they all remind him of Calhoun. Writer George Meyer conceived the joke. Matt Groening argued against it, insisting nobody would know who Calhoun was. Writers kept it because it was essential to the ending. Groening later claimed vindication, pointing to internet discussions asking, "Who is Rory Calhoun?" The humor lies in the absurdity. Since literally everyone stands and walks, Burns treats this universal trait as a unique identifying characteristic. For an entire generation, now multiple generations, Rory Calhoun is known almost exclusively as the guy who stands and walks. To millions of people who have never seen How to Marry a Millionaire, never watched The Texan, never heard of the Confidential Scandal, know his name because of a 13-second exchange on a cartoon. Rory Calhoun was still alive when that episode aired. He died 4 years later. Whether he ever saw it is not recorded. 10. The ex-con who shrugged it all off. Rory Calhoun's final film was Pure Country in 1992 with George Strait. He was 70 years old and still described as handsome as ever. His last screen appearance was a 1993 episode of Tales from the Crypt. In one surreal late-career moment in April 1981, at a career low point, he went to Las Vegas to coach a team of female mud wrestlers against a team coached by Adam West. Calhoun's team won. He spent his final years quietly in Studio City, California, with his wife Sue. He also owned a ranch in Ojai. He remained an outdoorsman to the end, fishing, hunting, horseback riding, archery. The boy who didn't like enclosed areas never stopped seeking open ones. Rory Calhoun died on April 28, 1999, at Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Burbank, California. He was 76. The cause was complications from emphysema and diabetes. He was cremated. His ashes were given to his family. No gravesite exists. He left behind his wife Sue, 5 daughters, and a body of work spanning 5 decades, 80 films, and roughly 1,000 television episodes. And he left behind something else, a philosophy about fame and failure that sounds like it was written for his tombstone. Quote, "Fortunately, I've never been what they call a superstar. So whenever I fell, I didn't have too far to fall. I've always been comfortable just under the top. I've enjoyed all of it. Even the low times didn't bother me that much. I shrug it off, forget it, and go on." That was Rory Calhoun, a man who shrugged off everything: the beatings, the prison cells, the solitary confinement, the scandal, the betrayal by his own agent, the declining roles, the giant killer rabbits, and eventually his own name being reduced to a punchline about standing and walking. He shrugged it all off. And he kept going. 80 films, 1,000 television episodes, 5 daughters, 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and one impossible journey from a San Quentin cell to a CinemaScope frame with Marilyn Monroe that nobody would believe if it weren't documented in mugshots, studio contracts, and 5 pages of Confidential magazine. The kid they called Smokey walked out of prison on his 21st birthday with nothing but a criminal record and a wicked punch. He died 76 years old on his own terms, Having outlived the agent who betrayed him, the magazine that exposed him, and the era that was supposed to destroy him, he shrugged it off, he forgot it, and he went on.